overcomplicating and skipping the basics tendency. This is the cleverness trap that very many intelligent people get into, and that's why they're not able to accomplish many things in their lives. And so, what is happening? There's a strong human tendency to overcomplicate problems and solutions, chasing cleverness or novelty while ignoring the simple, high leverage basics that deliver most of the impact. The result is that you waste effort on low value sophistication while obvious fundamentals remain undone. And this is a very critical thing that makes you waste so much time. But then, why does it exist? It exists because multiple human mind biases, combine together. And what they are, first one is liking and loving tendency. So we fall in love with our clever ideas and complex creations, since the basics can feel like reinventing the wheel. Then we have excessive self-regard. So if I made it, it must be smart. Bias towards complexity. We outhurt, like we made. And reward and punishment tendency, which is that complexity feels rewarding because they're like these nice little things. It's flattering to your intelligence, and it gets praise, while simple basics can feel boring. And then reason respecting tendency. So complex explanations sound more convincing than even when they're unnecessary. And social proof. So teams mimic what sophisticated peers and competitors do, assuming that more complex or more features means better in their product or the processes, while that's not actually true. And last one is availability misleading, which means that basics fade in the background while you have like this complex thing and it feels so present. You have it like here, so you misweigh the things that are not present in your mind right now. So evolutionary showing intelligence and skill improved status in mating prospects. And so in modern execution, this shows cleverness, but it often backfires that you don't really get things done. And then, how does it work? So there's the initial framing. Problem is taken on face value, but it's quickly intellectualized. Complex solution bias, like attention shifts to elegant and novel. Oh, it must be like this, it must be like that. We solved that, this amazing system we could build. Like easily it goes there because it's more stimulating to think like that. And the basics get skipped. Like you don't even realize, like the basics. Oh, they are boring. Like yeah, like basics. Like why would? And that's why they're getting ignored. They delayed or ignored like completely. And then you allocate your effort. You put like 80% of your effort to the things that impact 20%, instead of just doing the basics well, which will be 20% and impact 80%. And the last one is, so if there's culture that you're like intelligent people, then, and you do complex stuff, and then others might think that, oh, that's the right thing to do, like everybody's doing the complex stuff while we should just do the basics well. And that's how it happens. And a very simple example of this would be that you want to build a what's it called? E-commerce. Yeah, e-commerce site. You want to build e-commerce site, and you spend months on building the store without checking if there is any need for your products. What are you gonna sell? Or you don't even have the products yet, and he's just like, oh, this nice design, like people want to know. They don't care about design. if you solve a problem and you can show it to people, like the basics, right? That's a simple example. And so the dangers are that you misallocate effort and to low leverage work and you get nothing done. The core bottlenecks remain unsolved. You build fragile and complex systems that don't work in the end. There's a cultural drift towards cleverness, signaling instead of simplicity. These are the risks and the problems with it. And I find this current method that I created a little bit complicated, but I just want to mention the main principles on how to avoid this. So focus on 80-20 discipline, where you identify, okay, so what are the basics? What are the basics? 20% basics that deliver 80% of the value. What are they? And then we just execute these first. And we do the dumb first. Like, what are the basics? Look, if we take the e-commerce example, what are the basics? Okay, so do we have customers? How will our customers find us? Why will they choose us instead of someone else? Like, these are the basic questions you have to answer. While the nice store and a nice logo might feel very nice. And then a very good one which is that you just simply write down your thinking. I can tell an example of this, which is that so I was designing a product, and then I was like, okay, let's just simply like write down like persona, their problem, and how I'm gonna solve it. I remember I wrote down and how I'll solve it. Like, I'll look at it and I stare at it. I'm like, that will not work. I know for sure. But until that time, I tried to convince myself it will work, but it will not work. And so that was amazing to realize. So I wrote it down. Once it's clear, it's easy to have complicated things in your mind which will not work. But it's not that easy to write them down and stare at them. And then what you want to do after that, you have been written. What you want to do, you want to do external sanity checks. So you talk to someone else about that, your plan. And you ask like, are these the basics? Like someone who have kind of done it, you know? Are these the basics? Like, is this good? What do you think? Like, am I covering the basics? Like, just asking that from them. And they can have like pretty simple like ideas. One more example of this could be like, I was talking with my mentor, and then I was speaking about scaling to one continent. And then he was like, oh, like, how about scaling to the next country? And then I was like, oh, right, yeah. Like, our customer even has many, many projects there. Like, they have almost half of their people working in that country, yeah. And then he was like, so I was overcomplicating instead of doing what comes kind of easy. Okay, so now discovered 80-20 principle. So what are the basics that deliver 80% of the value with 20% of effort? What is the dumb basic stuff that we can do well? What are the basics? Starting with that. And then writing down the thing. Writing it down. Once it's written down, it's more clear. You cannot have complexity in it. And you will notice if there is something flawed. And then you do sanity check with someone external, who of course must have their incentives aligned. And you talk with them and ask them to help you to notice the basics. Oh yeah, one more. So in team environment, is that, so if someone is, oh, would this be cool? You want to have a culture where that kind of wording is not even allowed until the basics are working super, super well, and you cannot improve the basics anymore. Because that, oh, could we do this, guys? Like, oh, could we? And then people get excited, and you just waste the time of trying to do the basics right. And so when you're working on something, a simple method of avoiding the complexity is that you will like the complexity comes to your mind, and then you realize, okay, like that's like nice to have, like complexity. It's not that easy to do. Oh, okay. So will I need this information later? If so, I will write it to my notes in GTD. And if not, I'm just gonna ignore it. But I'm not gonna start to do it. Like I focus on the basics. Like, what are the basics that deliver the main value? Are they done already? If not, then do it. Okay. And then I think the last step of this and how to avoid it is that you simply do like simple checks and you see how processes work. And you try to think like, okay, what can I remove without fully breaking it? And then you try to remove it and you see if it works without complexity. All right. So when you use this in your advantage, what do you gain? You gain, if you develop a product, you gain users' trust. Like they trust something that just works instead of complex, nice features. Your execution speed will go up like crazy. So you can create something in hours instead of months or years. Yeah, and cultural signaling is the last one. So if you as a leader you focus on the simplicity, that will help a lot to people also focus on the simplicity, and you as a company to get things done. So if the leader is focusing on on the complex stuff, then everybody else will be also focusing on that even more, because people are naturally biased towards that. Yeah, so the core principle of this: complexity flatters ego, basics just deliver results. So nail the basics, high leverage fundamentals first, only then layer sophisticated delivery. So one more example: Apple came up with this half transparent UI. Imagine if they would have done that as the first feature. They would have never made it to the market, because that's kind of complicated. And now they did it. Well, it's kind of nice, but it doesn't really matter. So, but if they already nailed the basics, then you can layer on top of that. So always start from the basics.